Hi everyone, welcome back to my shop. If you remember in part 2, we ended up at the point of putting on the top wing, and you can see I've already done that, and I found it was a lot of fooling around to do, and it just wasn't worth putting it on the video. However, I did have lots of problems doing it their way. According to the book, you put the bottom wings on, put the struts on, and the aileron controls on. You take the top wing and assemble it all together in one piece, and you drop it into the fuselage up in here, into the screws after you loosen them up, drop them in, and then adjust your struts. Well, I found that there's no way to get them in there like that. For some reason, mine wouldn't go. I could not get the cabane struts to slide into the fuselage and into the screws. So I ended up doing it like I said I was going to do, and just do the center section first. And I had to loosen all the bolts on the cabane struts. There's only a couple, not very many. Loosen them up so that you have some wiggle room. Got them in there, tightened them down. Then I slid the outer panels on after I took the struts off. Okay. The reason for that is the mounting brackets are at 90 degrees. They're bent at 90 degrees. And you can see that the struts don't sit at 90 degrees. They set off on an angle. So what I had to do is take the strut mounts off, bend them to the correct angles that it needed to be to get them up underneath. And it was kind of a pain. A lot of messing around with the vise and bending them into place and getting the right angles. And that was just so the pegs would go through top and bottom. Otherwise they'd never go through. You can't line them up. They have to be bent, and it doesn't say that in the manual. So that's what I had to do. There was a lot of monkeying around. So I'm, like I said, that's why I didn't show that part. Once I got it all assembled, the top and bottom wing, I tightened up all the bolts, made my measurements to my vertical stabilizer to make sure the wings are straight, which they are, and started working on the ailerons, which were another problem. The controls, you can see, I'm using an app on my phone, so I don't know what you can see and what you can't see. Okay. Right here, the horns on the top are not mounted at the same spot as the horns on the bottom. They're staggered. So the problem with that is that you're going to get X amount of throw on the top or the bottom, and Y amount on the top aileron. So they're going to be different. For instance, they say 22 millimeter deflection on the bottom aileron, which gives you approximately 30 millimeters of throw on the top aileron. And that causes a big problem. Because of the angle of the strut, the way it's mounted, the top aileron will go over center and lock up. And let me show you that real quick. I'll come around to the other side. Okay. I moved the bottom aileron 22 millimeter. I have it marked so I can see where it is. All right, you see the deflection here is way more than 22 millimeter, about 30 millimeter. And then you have this problem. The bottom aileron is stationary, but you have this slop in the top. Let's say you start to get a flutter and this thing goes down and you try to give it the right aileron control. You can't, because it's over center and it locked. Not a good thing. I mean, I'll do that again. See, it locks it up. So maybe they depend on air pressure to hold that aileron up so it doesn't go into that locking situation. But if it starts to flutter, it will lock up. So I'm not going to use this configuration. I'm going to change the way the ailerons work. The struts will be mounted in the scale location. And the scale locations are at the back of the aileron. Okay, but I'm not going to make these functional. What I'm going to do to make sure it doesn't have any of these problems, I'm going to install servos on the top of the wings to run the ailerons. The struts are going to be just cosmetic, but they'll be in the scale location. That's the way I'm going to do it to get rid of this I don't know, Mickey Mouse problem. But if you want to do it their way, I went ahead and I kind of knew this problem was going to come up, but I went and made these struts or push rods for the ailerons, because all it came with is this black tube and the wire inside it, and it rattled around, and it's kind of ugly. So I went ahead and made some airfoil. This is a spruce covered with ultra coat, and in the front I sanded it to an airfoil shape and grooved out this front and glued the rod in there, so it looks a lot better. But I don't like the mechanics of it, so I'm not going to be using those. I anticipated this problem, like I said, so I made it so that I can still remove the ailerons on the top, because I knew something was going to be going on that I'm going to have to remove the aileron. So to put the servos in the top wing, I'm going to have to recover the aileron, mount the control horns in the same location as the bottom, so I get the exact amount of throw that I need, top and bottom, and the strut will work properly, that kind of thing. So that's where I'm at. I've also thrown in my receiver and stuck the servos into place for the elevator and rudder. No big deal. Nothing really to show there. You see the switch, and I'm using a Futaba R7008 SB. It's going to be it's an S-bus system. I don't know if I'm going to use the S-bus or not, because these are analog servos, and I thought about putting digitals in, but I don't know if it'll be worth it or not, so that's still up in the air. But it's a high voltage, so I can run a little higher voltage through it and accommodate the extra servos, I hope. I'll have to see when I get to that point and see if all that aileron extensions, the extension cords, are going to give me enough power to operate the top ailerons properly. Sometimes you do that and the aileron servo will get a little spongy, and that's because the signal's not reaching there because of the cord and so forth. I'm not going to go into all that. That's a whole different story. So that's where I'm at, and I'm not going to show putting in the servo in the top wing, because I'm going to do that after I get everything else set up. It's going to be at the very end, and it's going to be a hack job basically, because once a wing is built, you can't do nothing but hack into it and do the best job you can of installing whatever you're going to put in there. So that's going to be probably off camera. So where it's going to put us is down to the stabilizer, installing the stabilizer into the fuselage. You guys have probably done this 100 times, so it's not a big deal. I'll show a little bit of it and show the alignment, that kind of thing. Nothing you guys haven't done before, and that'll be pretty quick. And once that dries off camera, I'll probably install the hinges, the elevators onto the horizontal stabilizer, and the hinges on the rudder, that kind of thing. That'll be all off camera. So I've shown it in the P40 videos. If you want to see something like that, go back to the P40 video. You'll be able to catch up on how I do that. So I guess let me get my stuff together. I'll be right back and we'll install this stabilizer. After trying to show this in a whole bunch of different camera angles, I really couldn't come up with a good solution, so I'm just going to measure this out real quick and get this over with. And from wingtip Okay. Make sure that's right where I want. 41 and an eighth. 41 and an eighth. The other side here and do a quick measurement. $41 and an eighth. Oh. 41 and an eighth. One more time. 41 and an eighth. Perfect. Now that's lucky. I usually don't get that lucky. So, next step is going to be to pull the horizontal stabilizer out and trim the fabric away so I can glue it in. I'll do that part off camera. Next time I come back, this will be glued in and be ready to set the elevators. Be back in a minute. I finished putting on the elevators and the rudder. Everything is moving nice and free. I used 30-minute epoxy on the hinges. You've seen how I did that. Just gooped them up, stuck them on, wiped them all off. The best way to see how I do it is back in the P40 videos and when I installed the hinges on that. So if you want to catch that, that would explain a lot of that. We're down to installing the control cables to the rudder. I have the horns out here, the screw that runs in between them through the rudder. Let's see, the cable clamps, and of course the cable, the ball links, and I explained the ball links earlier on how you have to assemble them. But I'm not using the threaded rods they gave me with this kit. What I did is I went over to my shelf and I got a set of Dubro cable, pull cable, 440s. Let me show you. This right here, 440 pull system they call it, from Dubro. Anyway, I bought this like 20 years ago or so. Never used it. The day I went and bought it, it was on the clearance rack for $1.50 right there, $1.50. So what I did is I took the threaded rod out of this pack anyway and put the cheap threaded rod with the plastic red ends in here just to keep it a complete system. and stole basically the threaded rods. And what they are is a 440 threaded rod with a very small hole drilled in the end for the cable. All right, and a couple of screws and nuts to hold the ball links in place. Let's see, one thing it is missing are the screws that go through here. I'm not sure what happened to those. They weren't in the package. So that is pretty much it for this kit. The first thing I need to do is to pop a hole in the covering material where the horns go in. And the way I'm going to do that is I'll light it up with a flashlight from the other side, find it, poke a hole through there so I can set my control horn. So give me a minute, I'm going to do that. I'll be right back. Now, to be honest with you, it's been about 5 days since I've worked on this thing. I went on a small vacation and wife and I went camping up north. Kind of had a chance to unwind for a change. Where I left off was putting the control horns on the rudder. They're on there. I put one control cable on already, and I thought I would do a quick tutorial basically on how to put your cable onto your ball link on the threaded rod with the hole in it. Do that real quick. I'm sure you guys have done this 1,000 times. You might want to skip over this, but let me zoom in and do this real quick and we'll move on. You take your little crimp tube, you slide it on your cable, slide it up a little ways, give yourself a little slack, thread it through your ball link threaded rod or the plastic cup thing on what they give you. Slide it back through the crimp tube. Make sure you have a good amount of slack. So I'll push some more cable through there like that. And what I do, get down to the frame, I pinch the cable and the tag end, slide the tube down to where I think the loop holding my ball link is the right size. Now you take your tag end, go back around, and on the loop side, go back through and feed that through. Let's see if I can get it to go. Kind of a small thing to be showing. And you'll see it kind of loops like that. Then you pull it tight. And what I do is I squish it down a little bit, pull on it. I'll use a pair of pliers to do that, just to get it tight onto the crimp tube. And I found you'll never get it real tight. You can just get it fairly snug. And I don't have a crimping tool, so I use my needle nose pliers and I gently crush the tube onto the wires like this. I try to do it in 3 places. Just hard enough to crimp it, not hard enough to cut through it. And that is it. That's the best I can do. If you have a better way, I would say go for it. Do it that way. This works for me. I'm not trying to be super perfect on this, but that's how I do it. Now a pair of little side cutters, just clip off the end, and that's it. I have the rudder all connected up now. The cable's done, the horns are done. Not much else to do but to show you how it works. So you grab my transmitter here and give my rudder a wiggle for you. Let's see. Try that. There we go. And that's pretty much it. I do have one elevator hooked up, be on the port side You see the servo's working, not a big deal. All right, shut this off. The next thing I have to do is to hook up the starboard side elevator with the control rod that they give me. I have one ball link on there already, and from the inside, like this, I'll slide it through. Let me get this out of here. And then it'll go into the control horn, obviously. That's going to be mounted on the elevator. And I'll do the mounting of the horn off camera. It's not a big deal. You guys, like I said, you've probably done all this 100 times. So I'm not going to show that. I'll hook this all up when I come back. The elevator on the starboard side will be connected up and working and all adjusted. And then we can move on to this little guy. We'll install the tail wheel, get the cables on it. Here's the package. It has those cheesy little red threaded rods into a red cap with a hole in it for the cable. I hate them, so I won't be using those, and I'll show you what I'm going to use to replace those. Also on here, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but there isn't any adjustment on the tail wheel horn. So I'm going to change that so it has some kind of a keeper on there that's adjustable, so I can do a little tweaking, you know, both inside the plane and in the back of the empennage. So let me get to work. I'll install that rod and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, there it is. Everything's hooked up. Haven't adjusted the throw yet. I got a little bit of adjustment to do right here. I think the other side's pretty good. I'll get that with sub trim, or I'll take it apart and do the ball links. I'm not sure which I'm going to do. Probably do it in the ball links. So that is that. Okay, let me flip this thing over and we'll get working on the tail wheel and the cable. Back in a minute. These are the parts for the tail wheel control. We have the screw, the washer, and the nut, and that goes through the ball link to hold it to the servo. And you have the ball link, of course, and we have these ugly little threaded rods that go onto the cable. I don't know if you can see the little hole on the side for the cable, but they're there. I don't like using these. They're quite ugly. Who wants a red dot on the side of a white airplane? Now, you know, I don't get that. And we have the cable, and the cable is a plastic coated cable. So when you crimp it with these little crimp tubes, you have to do it quite hard to make sure that it grips the cable and not just the plastic. And this is just a cover for the strut. Now, since I don't like these red things, I figured maybe a lot of you might not like them either and want to do something else. And I showed on the rudder where I used the Dubro parts, but you can make your own. You don't have to rely on a manufactured item. And let me slide this over. You can see my solution. There we go. Now these I made up. This is a Sullivan connector with the clip, locking clip. I like those. It's a 440 nut. And this is just a cutoff screw, a 440 cutoff screw with a piece of brass tubing silver soldered to the screw, and I made a pair of those to go inside the plane, and I have holes in the brass for the cable, and they're kind of unsightly, so I don't want to use those on the outside. So what I did is I made some basically like the Dubro things, and I made these out of threaded rod. I just cut them off with about a ½ inch of non-threaded rod past the threads. And since those threaded rods are made out of cold rolled steel, we can manufacture our own. And what I did is I just hammered them flat, used a center punch, punched a little nick into it, and drilled it out for the size of the cable. And the ball links will screw onto the end of those. And they're a lot better looking. These are what are going to go on the back side, but I mainly did this so you can see that you can do this on the outside of your plane too, and get rid of these unsightly red things. But these are probably going to go in the back of the plane. I'm not sure, because everything's on the inside, so it doesn't really matter where they go, front or back. But that's my solution. More than likely this is going to go to the servo end. Put all the ball links on the servo end, put the quick keepers onto the horn on the tail wheel, and then I have adjustments in the front and the back. Okay, let's move on. The elevator and rudder are all hooked up. I'll show you that real quick. Up and down, right, left. Okay, now I'm going to give you some shots of the inside and underneath real quickly, and after that we'll move on. Here's an overhead view of the servos. Have the elevators and the rudder. Got a little bit of slack in the rudder. I'll take care of that later, but that's that. Here's a quick look from the bottom at the tail wheel assembly. You can see the Sullivan keepers on the horn, and there's the movement. All right, that's it for this. Let's see what's next. There's one last thing to do, and that is to put this brace right here onto the stabilizer, hooking it to this point here. The measurements are supposed to be 48 millimeters up, and I believe it was 10 millimeters in. And on the back, all it gives you is 100 millimeters from the back to this point. So I just have a line up here, so it gives me the 100 millimeter. I've already done the other side. And what I'll do, I'll take my handy dandy hand drill, and I'll pre-drill these holes, and then I'll stick my screws in with a drip of CA glue to harden up the threads, and call it good, and then we'll be on to the front of the aircraft. Give me a second. I'm going to put that on and take care of this real quick. The stabilizer braces are on there now, as you can see. They're not really functional. They're screwed into light wood. The screws are not very long. It's not a solidly mounted rod, so I would have to assume that it's cosmetic. Other than that, from the tail wheel back is pretty much done, or from the horizontal stabilizer back is pretty much done. And I think I'm going to jump to the fuel tank. Let me flip it over and we'll get started on that. I was going to install the tank. That was the plan. However, I need to put these little guys on first. These are the cowling mounts that mount to the firewall, and they're held on by these two little screws right here, and they mount right here. The two little tabs on the bottom there fit right in those slots, like so. And the two screws go in and hold it in place. If I let go, it'll just fall out, so can't get my hand out of the way. But that's where it goes. You can kind of see the two screw holes. And I've already done 5 of them. This is the last one. And let me put that on and we'll be done with this part. And then I got to hook up the throttle. I'll be right back. Throttle and choke are hooked up. And let's talk about the choke first. This is all basically scrap parts from other wrecks and leftover pieces. But the choke lever itself, the original is still on there. It's permanently fixed to the shaft for the choke, so I couldn't take it off. So what I had to do is cut out a piece of brass to make a new horn. And I tinned the choke lever, and I tinned the piece of brass with some solder, drilled a hole through it for a 256 screw to go through the hole on the choke arm, the original choke arm, and tightened that down with a 256 screw and nut and a lock washer. Then I heated it up with my soldering iron so the two tin surfaces could bond together so it's not going to slide around. Drilled a hole on the end for a ball link and the ball link connector. Then this is a brass coupler. It's hollow on one end. I'm sure you guys use these all the time. Hollow on one end, threaded on the other. A 256 rod, leftover rod, 90-degree bend on this end, and a quick keeper over here. This is an old Carl Goldberg leftover piece of scrap from another wreck. It's just a simple bell crank. I'm sure there's other manufacturers that put those out. 256 screw going through the center. And this is a very old Dubro clevis with a 256 jam nut and 256 rod, and that rod is threaded on one end like this one. I don't know if you can see the threads or not, but there it is, with a nut soldered onto the end of that so I can grab it easily. And here's the action. The way it's set up from the carburetor is that the choke rod, push rod, would have to come out the bottom of the cowl. And the more I thought about it, the more I didn't like that, because it'll be a hassle taking the cowling on and off and then having to fish this rod back through the cowling. And I thought this would be a better method so I don't have to mess with any of that. And right back here is a piece of tubing that keeps it from wallowing out the ball, so I just slid on there and glued with some CA. And going to the throttle, this is the throttle arm, of course. A Sullivan keeper with a little locking, I'm not even sure what those call, but it's just kind of a locking tab that goes on there. Another brass coupler, hooked to some goldenrod, which looks like, if for those who aren't familiar with it, I'm sure everybody is, looks like that. Hopefully that's focusing in because I can't see it. And that runs approximately 9.5 inches, maybe 10 inches, all the way in to the throttle servo, like in the picture. Now, to get that rod through there, I had to drill through the firewall, and there's 3 other formers in there scattered between like 8.5 inches worth of area back into here. The bad part about it was I had to drill through all that and not having a drill long enough to do it. So I had to make something to make that work. And that was this right here. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's a brass tube the size of an outer piece of nyrod. And I took my Dremel tool and serrated the end and chucked it into my drill and drilled it through. The goldenrod runs through a casing like this. I kind of colored the end so you can see inside it. But that's hollow. It runs in there. It goes all the way back to the last former inside where the servo sits. And you can see that in the picture. Now, I will show you how it works. Just show you the action. It's not a big deal, I'm sure. Let me get this to connect. There we go. There's the throttle action. So everything works as it should. That's low throttle, and I took the spring off the throttle arm so I have full control. I backed out the throttle stop so the butterfly will shut completely off. That gives me another point to be able to shut the engine off besides an optic switch or an external dead man switch. And at the low throttle with the trim, this is the trim all the way down, and this is the trim going all the way up, and that's full trim. That should give me a decent idle, I hope. I haven't run the engine yet, so I don't know, but I'll find that out, and if I have to make adjustments from there, then it's not a big deal. Put the trim all the way back down, and that's that. Shut this off. And you might have noticed that I did paint the firewall and paint it over top of any exposed wood. And there's one more thing I need to do is up here. Let's see if you can see that. There's some oblong cuts into this piece of wood here that need to be plugged up. I'm probably going to use 5-minute epoxy and microballoon and just fill that in and paint them over so you really can't see it. And that is it for the engine compartment for now. I still have to put the mufflers on, and on this side I might have to even cut away a little bit of this edge back here to accommodate the muffler. I'm not sure yet, I haven't tried it. But it's time now to probably mount the CDI and install the fuel tank. So let me flip this over and we'll get started on that. I'm not going to go too far into the tank itself. It comes unassembled, you have to assemble it yourself. They give you a diagram inside the book, along with, in the package with the tank comes an instruction sheet, two-sided. There we go. Shows you how to put it together, so it's fairly easy. And it's a 700cc tank. I don't know much more I can tell you about it. The cap screws on. You have to put the two, the fill and the overflow on there. You have a felt filter on the tank, copper tubing in the middle. There's an O-ring in the cap, and you have to, like I said, you have to assemble it. So they give you this wrench that goes up inside, and you reach up inside here, like that. Put the nut over the top, spin these down, and squish the O-rings. You don't want to make them too tight, otherwise the O-rings will expand out from underneath the nut. So you have to be careful there. But other than that, it's pretty simple. They give you 3 zip ties to hold everything together on the inside. Not much more to say to that, except for where the tank goes. And it's with this top piece on, it's really hard to get inside to show you where it goes. So I took a picture and put down where the straps go in that. It kind of shows you where it goes, up in the nose. And I'll give you another picture of it when I have the tank installed with the lines on it. And that's what I'm going to do next. So when I come back, the tank will be installed. I'll give you a shot of that, and then we'll move on to I'm not really sure what. I believe, let me take a look here. Okay, there's the tank. Straps. I already did that part. That part was about the throttle servo. And then we get into the cowling, it looks like. The fake engine goes in. And then you have to mount the cowling onto the front. which I'll do, and then after that I'm going to have to start cutting holes in the cowling for the exhaust. That'll take a little bit of time. Hopefully it won't take too long. And from there, they want you to mount the prop, install the receiver, and then it jumps into the electric part. Then we get into installing the windscreens onto the cockpit area. And one thing I noticed is that I was goofing around with it, and the cockpit area won't slide in with both pilots in the cockpit. The only way to do it is take the center section of the wing off, and that's a hassle. So I don't know if the pilots are going to go in. I don't know if it will slide on with the windscreens on. That's something I haven't checked on yet. Maybe from the front I can slide it through. I haven't tried that. But lifting it up far enough to pull it out this way, it's not possible. So that's going to be a bummer, because I like installing my switches inside so I don't have any holes on the outside. But we'll see how it goes. I'm not too sure, but hey, what can you do? You're gonna have to play the game as we go, right? So let me get the tank in, and I'll be back in a minute. I have the tank put in. It's held down by these Velcro straps supplied in the kit. They go through a couple of holes in this platform. You have to fish them through there. It takes a little patience, but it can be done. Right here is the fill line, which goes down the side of the fuselage to a filler valve that's outside the fuselage behind the cowl. This is the overflow line, and it kind of loops back, goes to a brass tubing that's just about halfway up the tank, and it goes straight out the bottom. And of course in the front is the carb line. Not much else to talk about. Plenty of room for it. So from here, I think we're going to go and mount the cowl. Be right back. I was just talking about the fuel tank. So this is the filler right here, the fill valve. It's on the outer shell of the fuselage inside the plane. There's a vertical former that goes in behind that, and you have to fish your fuel line and this fill valve through that mess in there and find the hole that you drilled for it. And it takes a little patience, but it can be done. Now onto the cowling mounting. These are 1/4 inch squares that I cut out of a 1/4 inch sheet of balsa, and what they do is raise the height of my paper template. If you watch my other videos, you've seen how I do this. I don't like to measure things out precisely if I don't have to, and what I do is lay this paper, it's taped to the block, lay it over top of the plastic mount, and I put a bend in it so I know exactly where the end is, and a couple of bends on the side. Then I take a machinist ruler like this, and I know where center is. I just use that little gauge, and I find center going both directions. Put my mark in, and then bend it back over, put my cowl on and adjust it, and lay the template back over, drill the holes. Pretty simple, and the reason I do it this way is to keep those screws in a straight line. On my planes, I really don't like it if I'm like the screw is up here and the next one's down here, and you know, in a nice straight line, it looks good. And using a paper template, you don't have to measure so much. So let me drill these out, put the cowling on, get it adjusted, drill these out, and I'll come back when the cowling's mounted. I know I said I'd come back after the cowling's been installed, but there's a lot of things going on underneath the cowling that I should talk about a little bit. And that is, number one, the CDI unit that I had to mount, and it's held onto the firewall by 2 zip ties. I got holes going through the firewall, and behind the CDI I put a little bit of foam rubber. It's an old habit from the old days, just to keep things shock mounted a little bit. The spark plug wire is held on to the engine, I guess you'd call it the firewall box, by a piece of plastic that's looped around it and screwed through the top. And on this side it's zip tied right here, and down here you can't see it, but there's a plastic clamp that holds it to the firewall. Okay, there's the clamp that I was telling you about. It's just a piece of plastic that I found later on. It's quite pliable. 2 screws holding it on both sides just to keep the wire stable and not flopping around. That's all that's for. There it is. Cowling is mounted, prop is on it, spinner's on. Everything under the hood is connected. So that's pretty much all buttoned up. What I have to do is get into the radio compartment and finish that. But before I do that, I'm going to swing around to the front and you can take a look at the dummy engine that came with the kit and how I cut it out to get a little more airflow. The dummy radio that they give you is pretty easy to install. Getting it centered was a little bit of a problem, but not too bad. Then having to cut the cylinders out to give me enough airflow to go around my twin, that was another little problem. But it all seems pretty stable in there. It doesn't flop around, it's fairly sturdy. I'm going to add a little bit more to the back of the dummy engine to harden it up a little bit and stiffen it up. But other than that, I believe that it's done. Oh, and the dummy radio is held on by silicone. Just some RTV around the inside of it. And then once you do that, let it dry, and supposedly it's going to stay. Okay, enough of that. I think we're going to head on into the fuselage and finish up the radio. I've gone beyond just putting the radios in. I couldn't help it. I just got tired of the mechanical stuff and wanted to do something different, so I just cut all the red stickers out and lined them up, measured them up, and stuck them on. I just wanted to get that over with. Not my most favorite thing to do, so and there's not a lot to show. I just cut the red out right on the edge of the red, so none of the white was left. I used window cleaner to make the surface slippery so I could slide things around for a little bit. Then used a old credit card, squeegeed the water out from behind the stickers and let it set for 24 hours, and that's about it. There's not much to really show. Maybe I'll do a video sometime on putting these on. It'll be about a 10-minute video if I do. It's not much to it. But the radios are in. I had to make some little holders like for the receiver and the battery packs, one for the ignition, one for the receiver. A couple of little antenna stands to keep them separated. I have one going vertical and one horizontal. And I did the adjustments on the elevator to level them out and get the correct throw. They say 22 millimeters the throw on the elevator. When you look at it, it doesn't look like it's moving very much. It's minuscule. But I'll show you all that in a minute. Let me rearrange the camera, point it inside, let you see how I set this up, and then I'll show you the surfaces moving. Then that's going to be it for the internal parts of the plane. I'm going to put the wings on and basically hang it from the ceiling to get the balance. So hold on, let me get the camera moved. Be back in a second. Well, there's the setup for the inside. I have a life battery over here. It's a 3000 milliamp for the receiver. I have a 2000 milliamp life battery over here for the ignition. On-off switches, ignition, receiver. You can see the little trays I had to make. They all have a little bit of foam rubber underneath, held on by Velcro. They're glued down to this platform. All the servo wires run underneath and they come up through this hole right here. There's not much else to say about it. Pretty simple stuff. It looks a little bit disorganized. This is the wire that goes to the ignition battery. I have that unplugged. And the receiver I have plugged in because I'll be showing you the movement on the surfaces here shortly. But that's it. I finally got it to balance after working probably, I don't know, 5 hours on it, trying to round up lead and figure out where to place the lead. I finally got it to balance. I still have 2 more chunks of lead to put in that are just sitting on the nose behind the cowl, but I'll do that in a few minutes. I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but this is the contraption that they give you with the kit to balance it. Got an aluminum tube up here for a handle and a black string going to 2 thumb screws on 2 I don't know what you call them, jigs. I would have to call them. They're held on by 2 pegs in the wings, peg on both sides, and the aluminum strut tube. So it's hanging there basically from the ceiling, of course. And I started stacking weight on it, trying to get it to balance. And by the time everything was said and done, including the 2 pieces there, I have 3.99 pounds in the nose. But it's pretty much done. All I have to do is mount a couple pieces in there permanently and the balance will be done. Next step is going to be installing the windscreens. I have 1 cut out and it's just sitting here just to be pretty. I have 1 more to go right here. I have to cut out, and I'll do that in a minute here. I'll put this on camera so you can see it. These are not the funnest things to cut out because the paint likes to chip. The paint does not stick to this plastic worth a darn. When I cut that one out, paint was flying everywhere. So I need to touch that windscreen up, and I'm sure I'll have to do the same to this one. But when I get it down, we'll proceed on with the windscreen. And that will probably take us to the end of part 3. There is going to be a part 4. I'm going to take this outside, test run the motor, and then take it to the field and get some flights in on it. The reason I want to get it done so quickly, even though it's taken me such a long time, the reason it needs to be done right away is that at the end of this week, today is Sunday, and Thursday we set up for our air show, our Gladwin Area RC Club Air Show. It's going to be a 3-day event. You can check it out on Facebook. The flyer should be on there. I started this show 6 years ago. The club didn't have anything really for the public to come and see. Matter of fact, most of the public didn't even know there's a model airplane club in town. So it was a good thing that we started it. We started to get a little bit more attention, some new members, and it has grown. It's grown to a point from being one day from 10 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon to now it's a 3-day event. And the date, I'll tell you the date, it's going to be this weekend. It's going to be starting on August 9th, 10th, and 11th. And this will be this year, 2024, of course. Next year we're going to have the same deal. Hopefully it'll be bigger. We have guys coming from as far away as Detroit, maybe even further from out of state. Got some really good pilots coming this year, and we're hoping to make this a bigger show and possibly more. We got a big enough field that we can probably host warbird events and whatever. So yeah, that's my reasoning to hurry up and get this done. All I have now is a giant Sportster to fly. My giant Aeromaster's laid up with a broken ballast mount, basically. The lead weights in the nose, I built the aluminum mount and it cracked, and I haven't had time to fix it, so that one's out. I still have my turbine jet, so I'll have my turbine jet. Hopefully this one will be maidened enough that I can fly it. are maiden and test flown enough that I can fly it. And I have that old giant Super Sportster. Nothing to look at, but it flies great. And I didn't want to be stuck with one airplane in my jet. I wanted a decent prop plane, so this is going to have to fit the bill until I get something built. Okay, I'm going to get this down. Enough of all that stuff. I'm going to get this down. We're going to start working on the windscreens, and we'll wrap up this video so I can move on to the next part. Back in a second. Okay, to get to this last windscreen, I tried using tape, masking tape, to make an outline on the outside, and what it did was just peeled up the paint because I put it on the windshield. So putting it down here didn't make it any easier putting it down low. I don't know, it just didn't work out so well. I just don't know why. It just makes a good guide though. But I'm going to freehand this one. And what I'm going to do is just score the plastic and then slowly cut through it. That seems to work the best so you don't get a whole lot of chipping. So here goes. And if I cut too wide, I'll just use my drum sander and neatly trim it out. I'm using a fresh blade, of course, to cut through this. Having a hard time seeing. It's the glare is getting to me a bit. And that cut was a little wide, but I'm not worried about that. See that? It just chipped the paint right off. That paint just does not stick to this plastic. Now I'll just run down the same cut line over and over until it goes through. Just lost the tip of my knife. That's going to cause me a problem. There, it's out. Well, it's starting to go through. Try to cut through the rest of this. Voila. And that's basically all I do, is just keep working the cut line over and over and over until it punches through. And this plastic is very, very thin, so it doesn't take much to go through it. I'm going to have another piece of chip paint right here on this corner, it looks like. Right in the front. Okay, I'm going to spin it around so I can see it. Some more paint. And the last cut line. Well, that's hard to see. There it is. Drag my knife across it. Oh, it's going to go pretty easy this time. And one last cut right down here. I have to turn it so I can see it. Not the prettiest cut line in the world. And that's it. You can see all the chip paint that come off the front. That doesn't really matter because they give you a piece of white tape that goes around it just to trim it out. Not the prettiest white tape in the world, but it works. And let me go around the inside here. This is real thin right here, so you can get this in one go. Just don't let your blade stray like I'm doing right now. And whatever comes out a little crooked, just get it with a piece of sandpaper. A little thick in the corner here. There it is. What I'm going to do is run the sandpaper down the edge, trim this up a little bit, and call it good, and then glue it on the plane. Back in a minute. I'm going to make an attempt at showing you the trim tape being put on. I don't know how this is going to work because I might be in the way of the camera too much. So here goes. Going to kind of peel back the backing a bit. Give myself some working room. Well, this is sticky stuff. And I'm going to have to do it in 3 pieces. It's just the way it's going to work out. There's number 1. Trim it off. I know I'm in the way. I'll trim the back edge off later. I'm going to do the other side. Try to reach around everything and do this so you can see. Well, this might not work out so well, but we'll try it. Try anything once. Yeah, that wasn't so bad. I don't know if I'm in the way, but there it is. It's laid down. Air is pushed out from behind it. Now I got to trim it up with my knife. That's that. Need to have a straight edge on this. Trim the edge off again. Okay, one last piece. Goes across the front. Trim this one up. Well, this is really awkward doing it like this. Trying to show you and stay out of the camera's way. and make everything look correct. Stand on my tiptoes to see what I'm doing, because I'm not that tall. So it's hard for me to see what the heck I'm doing sometimes. Okay. Maybe 2 cuts on this one, I don't know, I have to see. That should do it, I think. Peel this guy off. Yeah, there we go. There it is. It's the best I can do. If this was a build, this would have been a lot easier to do, because it'd have been glued on and filled and painted and be perfect, but ARFs are not perfect. And me putting ARFs together, I'm definitely not perfect. But there it is. I need to trim off the back, but I'll do that in a few minutes. And it looks okay, I suppose. Well, that brings us to the end of part 3. Windshields are on, or windscreens, or whatever you want to call them. The tape doesn't seem to want to stick right here for some reason. I'll have to figure that one out later. But I need to do a little trimming on the ends here. Not a big deal. 2 seconds. Other than that, it's done. Part 4 is going to be the engine test run, maiden flight, if I can find somebody to film it. Otherwise, it'll just be a short clip on the test run if I can't find anybody to film for me. So that is going to conclude this video. Oh, one more thing. Pilots. These are some ugly pilots. Their faces are a yellowish green. I'm going to have to mix up some kind of paint that's not going to affect the paint underneath. I'm not sure what it is, so I'm going to have to do some testing. What I plan on doing, though, is I'm thinking about attaching some Velcro on here underneath them, stick them down in the plane, and hopefully they won't come out. If they do, it's no great loss, because they are some ugly looking pilots. But that's my plan. So that takes care of the last piece. So I guess we'll call it a day. So until next time, you guys have a good one.